Ghana's debt exchange, the haircut now getting to those investors elsewhere. External bondholders, they are getting 37% haircut in the restructured debts. 13.1 billion US dollars restructured. 4.7 billion US dollars saved, quote unquote. What is the president and finance minister celebrating? Deferred pain? Some economists predict suffering, while others are excited at the reliefs that bring certainty to the financial market. Well, the IMF approves disbursement of $360 million to Ghana. Very irritable Trade Minister K.T Hammond has been snapping at and abusing cement manufacturers for simply asking for consultations over his move to get a law to control pricing of cement. Cement produced by the private sector. Cement prices have risen from 14 cedis in May 2012 to a whopping 108 cedis in June 2024. What exactly is the cause? Is it the manufacturers and the retailers? Or it's about the economy? Well, it will go up again next week, the prices. Just as fuel prices will also go up next week. But how is this government's approach a solution? Those buying their kenke, the one they used to buy for a pesewa or at 1 cedi, those buying it today at 7 cedis will definitely disagree with those arguing that it is a matter of inflation and exchange rates rather than profiteering that can be stopped with a law with sanctions, including 3 years jail terms. Alan's 81-page book of bold, transformative policies for a sound economy and governance. One of the usual manifestos we have seen, with a duopoly that continues to impoverish our circumstances and with bad governance. We examine the movement for change's blueprints for governance. Alan is seeking to scrap the useless Council of State that does not account to the people, seeking to reduce the size of government to 40 ministers and fight corruption head-on. We'll examine that. I'm Samson, Lardy, Anyenini, and this is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform.
The requirements for the second review following the staff level agreement, I'm glad to announce that the IMF Executive Board has today, Friday, 28th June 2024, approved Ghana's second review with overwhelming support for Ghana from the executive directors. Consistent with our resolve to stay the course on the implementation of the $3 billion 3-year IMF support.
Wait until the announcement. The confidence in our economy is going to come back stronger because the world is no longer interested in investing in Ghana because of those there's restructuring. After tomorrow, it will be a different story. Watch the cedi to the dollar after tomorrow. I know you are interested in that story. Let's watch it and see. The confidence will come. The investors will return to Ghana and the growth trajectory would even become clearer for all of us. So this election is an election for us to win. The NDC can no longer campaign on the economy. Our record is better than their record. On the size of the economy, we've done better than them. On per capita income, we've done better than them. On job creation, we've done better than them. On economic growth, we've done better than them. They say we went to IMF, but it's not easy to be under an IMF program because we've seen them before. When they were under IMF program, by 2016, they missed all the targets. So far, Ghana has become an example. We met all our prior conditions and the IMF praised us and disbursed $600 million. This economy will grow, and it will grow faster than everybody thinks. By the end of this year, we are supposed to grow at 3.2%.
Right, so that's the Minister for Finance. Clearly, we are getting into the silly season, but is he speaking facts, or is just the usual political propaganda in campaigns? Dr. Theo Champong is economist and political risk analyst. Dr. Frank Bano is economist and director of research, the Dankwa Institutes. Kofi Adams is MP Boem and member, Public Accounts, Defense and Interior Committees of Parliament. Let me begin with Dr. Theo Champong. Yeah, so Dr. Theo Champong, what do you understand by starting with Adams's invitation to us to watch for what will happen tomorrow, and that tomorrow has actually come and gone? What exactly are you seeing that should happen to the economy because of the restructuring of the debt?
Okay. Good morning, Samson, and I hope you can hear me very well.
Yes, please.
And yeah, it's always a pleasure to be here. I think before we answer that question, it's important to understand, or maybe for the purposes of our listeners, why the restructuring took place. And then we can then look at, what effect that has for the economy. And I think I gave a couple of material to your producers to put on the screen for our listeners. But we've had 3 levels of restructuring over the last 18 months. We started with the domestic debt exchange. And if you looked at the total composition of our public debt by creditor category, almost about 52%, right? So half of that was comprised of the domestic debt, and there were issues in there more or less to do with the extent of the borrowing and the interest, and the government had to do something about it. And that was a very, very, very painful exercise. And we've been here on this platform many times where we even saw pensioners at one point picketing at the Ministry of Finance over some of the potential, quote unquote, haircut or losses that they were going to suffer. Then you had the second aspect of it, which was the external bilateral debt restructuring. So this is Ghana and the likes of the Paris Club members that we owe, right? And that bilateral restructuring took place and was completed in June, early June, actually, of this year, although we got the initial agreement or agreement in principle in January of this year. The third bit, which was the most, or was going to be the most difficult, was going to be the external commercial debt restructuring, so the Eurobonds. And we knew that the Eurobonds were about 13 billion out of a total of about 20 billion, right, that was available to restructure under that. And to the extent that that actually has now been completed together with the other 2. And this was the biggest albatross, more or less, around the neck of the economy in proverbial terms. Then it actually gives us, in my view, a good cause to now think about how we grow the economy going forward. So the restructuring of the debt it's actually quite significant and very substantial in my view. And I think given the difficult, painful 2 years that we've had, the prospects going forward actually is quite, good for the economy as a whole. It won't happen overnight, as some of my, the MPP or the Minister of Finance is saying about watching the CD to the dollar and all of that. But again, it's important. If you look at the next slide, what exactly we've gotten through this debt deal, and then I'll come to what it means, right? So with the bilateral creditors, we had to forego almost about the effective nominal haircut is about 38%, right? So 5 billion, about 38%. So basically, what the bilateral creditors got is about 62 cents on the dollar. Then in April, when the original proposal to the commercial creditors went through, the proposal was about 71 cents to the dollar. And then they said that it did not meet the debt comparability treatment threshold. So we have to go back and rework the numbers. And the numbers that have come through, more or less, is now closer to what the bilateral creditors offered. So basically about 36, 38 cents on the dollar. And that means that we are having to forego over the next 3 years in terms of the interest and the principal repayments that would have had to make almost about 4.4 or 4.7 billion dollars that we would have had to find money for. That no longer is going to be the case. So you're actually getting some form of debt forgiveness, and then going forward, the debt itself, so the remaining bit that then has been restructured, you look at the coupon structure on those debt, you actually, instead of an average of about 7.5% before the restructuring, now you're looking at about 5% or so. So again, that creates some potential savings cost for the government for the restructuring. So these are, for me, it's important. And it's also important because you look at the economic numbers, and the turnaround within the economy in the last few months is largely been positive. So we saw the numbers that came through from the statistical service. You're still talking 4% quarter-on-quarter growth in real terms. We've also seen just yesterday the IMF announcement of the completion of the second review, which is largely good. And we've even announced some deal with the independent power producers to restructure their debt. So the positive aspect then of it is that this would unlock more financial resources for us or for the country through the interest and the principal write-offs that we're getting, right? And the deferred repayments, but also the additional multinational financing that would come through for us as a country. What effect would that have on the dollar, on growth and the CD and things like that? I think immediately, of course, you see a bit of a show up on the reserves of the central bank with the release of the 360 million. But I think it's going to take a little bit longer for us to actually see that dramatically affect growth as within the timelines that the finance minister is talking about. So I'm a little bit skeptical in terms of the bullish sentiments that the finance minister expresses, but definitely the indicators have begun to turn in the right direction. We can do a lot more to support that, like on inflation and other things. And then I think we'll come to the other point that I talk about, where for me, this agreement is not enough. The external commercial debt that we've done, and then the other one, it is not enough to guarantee any long-term fiscal sustainability. In other words, it would not curb the pace of borrowing and the fiscal recklessness for a number of reasons. And it's important we address that, because as we're already talking about the 4.4 billion potential deferment or debt reprieve that we're getting, the government is already talking, there are two news stories on this. You can go on my Joe Online and then on the Ministry of Finance's website about getting $2 billion from the Koreans and then another $1.7 billion from Afri-Exim Bank for SMEs and infrastructure and other projects, right? Together, this is $3.7 billion if they materialize. And that is almost going to be as much as the savings that we're making over the next 3 years under the commercial debt restructuring. So the 4.4 billion in there, right? So in one sense, you restructure the debt to GDP may come down, but it actually would not, because little have we concluded this that we're already thinking about going, for the next round of borrowing in that sense. And that's what gives me a little bit of a cause, for worry. And I'm sure we can come back later to what do we do to actually curb then the recklessness that we see. And
right.
I have 4 proposals on that.
Right. When we say, help my audience to appreciate, when we say savings have been made, in the domestic debt exchange, we are supposed to have saved 61 billion Ghana cedis. Then the bilateral debts, we are supposed to have saved $2 billion US. And then this one, commercial debt, $4.7 billion US. What does it mean to say we have made savings for which we should be celebrating?
So from a macro fiscal point of view, this is money that you would have had to find to pay the interest and or the principal that is owed, right? The people that you owe. So to the extent that you now actually come in and the people say, well, don't pay all of it or pay some, and even on the interest that is owed, we've actually brought down the interest from a certain percentage. So in the case of the commercial, you're talking an average of about 7.5% to around 5%. You're making a 2.5% of 250 basis points, right? Net difference in that. So basically, in simple terms, is money that the government would have had to find, right? Either borrow more to reservice those old loans, or in extreme circumstances, even print money, right, to service that loan, but actually will end up causing inflation. And this is what it means. It doesn't mean necessarily that the money was there or the government actually had the money there. So if you look at the budget, we make provision for interest payments. So in the 2024 budget, I think in paragraph 376 or 78, we made provision for $56 billion, right, of our expenditure for just interest payments alone under the accrual accounting rules. It does not mean that the government put $56 billion there to actually use that to service the loan facility. But to the extent that they no longer have to get this money or print this money or borrow more to do that, then that, from a point of view of the government,
help me again, Doc. $4.7 billion US on the commercial debt. Is that forgiveness? Is it like some, HIPIC blessing we have gotten? So that debt is wiped off?
Yes, so an element of the debt has been wiped off. So the haircut that the commercial creditors have taken
37%?
38%.
Okay.
Right? In other words, for every 1 CD, assuming that they owed, or $1 that they owed, they're getting back about 64 pesos or 64 cents.
Right.
Yeah, that is how it works out.
Just as happened in the domestic debt exchange program.
Yes, similar thing with the domestic debt exchange, except that, of course, with the domestic debt exchange, what then happened was not on the principal, but the interest bit that was restructured. So
yes, but people have lost, in the domestic debt exchange, people have lost 61 billion of their money, or they have given it as a dash to the government.
Yes, of interest that they would have earned from giving their money to the government, they did not get that.
Right.
And they will be getting some new interest with the 4 bonds that were offered under the domestic debt exchange. And then in this new one, the commercial restructuring, you also have both the cut on interest as well as principal, right? And then you have potentially the extension of the maturity or the duration of these bonds. So if you actually work out the key metric in all of this is the net present value of the nominal debt that you owe. So basically, in simple terms, if you were to take all of the cash flows over the period of 20, 30 years that you owe the money, and you brought it forward or discounted it forward, what would that be worth? Quickly on that, if you look at the bilateral, it was 5 billion. The NPV after restructuring is around 3.2 billion. If you look at the commercial, it's 13 billion that we owe. If you work the numbers as I have done, you're looking at an NPV of around $7.4 billion. So effectively, you're getting, 64 cents on the dollar from an investor.
Let me get to Dr. Frank Bano of the Dankwa Institute. Kenneth Thompson is someone you should know. He's a CEO of Dalex Finance, a formidable finance person in this country. He says, I have been in the business of lending money. Writing off debt is not a small matter, and we have got to face the issue, deal with the reality, and not put pampers on Ghana. It's not going to work. You must be familiar also with Dr. Richmond Etiahene, banking consultant. He says, stuck stuff. We are treading on dangerous path like Argentina and Greece. I hope that doesn't come to us. And we don't want to go there because every 4 years we would have to go and restructure the debt because you haven't put in anything that will be able to pay the cash flows. I conclude with Professor Peter Korte, Director of ISE, who says, this announcement brings some level of certainty to the market because we have been waiting for it for far too long. Many investors, both individual and corporate investors, have been waiting for this news. You know, uncertainty affects the financial market. What do you say to the two gentlemen that I quoted first, comparing what they had to say with Professor Peter Korte?
Well, Samson, thank you very much, and a very good morning to your listeners, and a good morning to my senior colleague, Dr. Tiochum. Yeah, so just as you rightly articulated in the quotes that you mentioned in terms of the debt restructuring, it is also very important, Samson, that we appraise ourselves with the historical background. I mean, in terms of under the Fourth Republic, is it something that we are just seeing it for the first time? Is it something that we've done before? And what were the economic benefits and leverage that came out of these kind of debt restructuring? But then in terms of the commentary that you've said, I mean, let me just speak briefly to it before I go to the underlying historical antecedents and also delve deeper into the benefits or more or less the leverage and the levers that this debt restructuring seeks to offer Ghana as a country to chart a new path, and then going forward, we can look at the things that we can do to also consolidate the gains that we have achieved from structuring this. But Samson, it's important to note one thing, that as a developing economy like Ghana, a country whereby in most of the cases you have your income, I mean, in terms of domestic revenue, far less than your total expenditure, then you would always incur a deficit. And that is something that I think myself, as an academician, I've made this point on several platforms, that as far as you continue to incur a deficit, you would find ways and means to finance that deficit. And obviously, you can do so by going to your central bank to get some kind of financial sustenance there. And if your central bank, for example, if the BOG does not have the capacity to do that, as we saw in 2012, whereby we had a fiscal deficit of 11.6% of GDP, in 2020, whereby because of COVID, we had a fiscal deficit of 10.8% of GDP, then the most likelihood is either to go to the domestic market or to go to the international financial market. But we also know that the chances are that if you are borrowing too much from your domestic market, then obviously it also has repercussions by crowding out private sector investment. And for that matter, you wouldn't also want to endanger the private sector, and for that matter, private investment, which has the capacity to drive your economy. So then the most ultimatum is for you to go out there and borrow, which also at the end of the day, because of your credit rating, I mean, being a developing country like Ghana, obviously, and coming from Africa, your credit rating going to the same financial market wouldn't be the same as maybe your peers in Europe or in the US, who might get the same access of fund at a very cheaper rate, but you would also be borrowing the same fund at a very exorbitant and higher rate. In fact, if Samson, your good self, if you've had a chance to read some of the World Bank and IMF publications, one of the things that these publications seek to outline is the fact that the cost of accessing finance by developing countries and developing economies, for that matter, African countries, sometimes it's outrageous, I mean, compared to their peers from even Eastern Europe or Asia or elsewhere across the globe. So that is also the stark reality that we are faced to contend with. Then coming back to the core issues of Samson and trying to set the background for this. In 2001, if you quite remember, when President Kufuor assumed office, where we had a debt to GDP of about 182% of GDP, I mean, one of the things that President Kufuor's economic management team, together with foreign consultants, saw was that the domestic debt was one of the things that actually was impeding Ghana's progress in terms of financial sustenance and viability. In fact, the domestic debt stood at 6.1 trillion, representing about 91 and 182-day treasury bill and 1 year treasury bill notice only, and that we're paying so much in terms of interest in servicing these debts that's actually in 2001. So one of the things that President Kufuor thought it wise to do was to restructure these domestic debts. And one of the key things that you saw was whereby we had to go through the process of having the Government of Ghana index linked bond, whereby we realized that, look, we cannot be paying an interest rate beyond the actual growth rate of our economy. You can't be paying an interest rate of about 17, 18, 20%, whereby your economy is growing at around 3, 4, 5% thereabout. Then how do you generate enough to service these flows that are coming in? So if you remember very well, these bonds were indexed and then it was set at a rate of 5%. That is the growth rate at that time, perceived to be at that time, that we were not going to pay any interest beyond this point for the next 3 years, which gave us that room for the economy to have that fiscal breathing space. So if you take a look at that data at that time, in 2000 and in the years ahead, that is 2002 and 2003. In 2002 alone, that decision saved Ghana about 187 billion Ghana cedis, and in 2003, it saved us 481 billion Ghana cedis under that domestic debt restructuring sort of that we did in 2001. Similarly, it was this project that actually helped us to leverage on or serve as a catalyst to have that well-developed government bond sector that we have in Ghana today. So Samson, that has been our history, and that is where we are coming from. Now, coming back to the substantive issue at hand, whereby we are talking about the restructuring of these debts, Samson. I mean, it has the benefits, and it also has the other aspects. But I want to focus on the benefits for now, but going ahead in terms of what we can do to make sure that we do not find ourselves in where we find ourselves again is somewhere maybe we try to assess the antidotes and then the remedies that we can also prescribe in that matter. And also something, so I would like to look at these debt restructuring in two forms. So the first form that I will look at it is the stock treatment. Now, the stock treatment is whereby we have the 37% haircut that Dr. Tiocham obviously said. And then the flow aspect is whereby we have the interest reduction, whereby we are having an interest of about 5%, which is going to give us a savings of about 4 billion. So in terms of the stock, that is the amount of money that we're supposed to pay, including the principal, then the country is earning about $4.7 billion thereabout. But what does this mean, Samson? And how is this even important to the Ghanaian economy, or the ordinary Ghanaian, my mother in the village, who elsewhere? How does it even affect them? Now I want to look at it from an analogy, Samson. Now imagine you have a big credit card bill, Samson, and it can also be interpreted this way. If I owe you money and I come to pay, and you say, no, don't pay, but keep it, then it will be interpreted that you have given me money, isn't it? Because at that point in time, I could have invested that money in something else to earn me returns, which I can also use in furtherance of my personal development or my personal growth. And for that matter, if we are looking at it as the general economy, then that is something that we can also look at it. Now, on the savings angle, Samson, I would also want us to look at this analogy, Samson. Imagine you have a big credit card bill and you are struggling to make payments. Then the credit card company comes to you and give you a break that no payments for a while. They say for the next 3 years, so in the case of Ghana, from 2023 to 2026, that we are not supposed to pay interest on these bills. So you don't have to pay us anything. What does it imply? This simply means that you save the money that you have been paying on interest, which at the time that maybe you might have generated enough funds within your economy to service this interest. Now,
that's like deferred suffering or pain. Perhaps
yes.
Perhaps what in Chi it will be said, is that it? You are just deferring what you suffer.
But see, the most important point here is that if we are taking a look at the 2024 budget statement, which was read, and I think Dr. Tuichampo mentioned those figures, and I think what he said was in dollars, but I think they are in Ghana cedis, if I'm right. I mean, I think the total expenditure is about 224 billion Ghana cedis, and out of the 224 billion Ghana cedis, about 119 billion Ghana cedis, which covers both our compensation and interest service. And I think interest service alone is costing us about 55 to 6 billion Ghana cedis in that regard. So something, if you have an economy like this, whereby your first two expenditure lines are monies that are going into compensation. Let's put compensation aside, that's another topic for discussion. But then the second leading line of expenditure is interest payments. And if you look at the same budget and you are looking at allocations to MMDAs and all government agencies at an amount of about 38 billion Ghana cedis, then you have a problem. So in terms of the amount of money that you are using to service interest alone, it's far greater than the amount of money that you are giving to government or state mandated institutions, then you certainly have a problem. So if this is the case whereby you are being told that, look, Samson, today, within the next 3 years, you can keep this money. You don't need to pay this money swap. Then obviously, you can rationalize expenditure by investing these sums of money into prudent ventures of their economy. You know that this is a developing economy, and when it comes to infrastructure-wise, when it comes to agriculture and other critical parts of the economy, a lot is required in terms of funding. So if we are having this fiscal room, as I have rightly described it, and then we don't need to pay these monies within the next 3 years, then obviously it gives government that leverage to invest in these critical sectors of the economy, which has more or less come to a stop. And we've seen it in various parts of the country whereby roads were started and then it had to be paused. So obviously, we cannot downplay the significance or the importance that this restructuring brings to the economy.
I'm going to ask this question to you and also to Dr. Tuichampo before I come to the studio. And it's on the back of a statement by Franklin Cudjoe of Imani, Ghana. And he was responding to what the president said. He said, I told you we knew how to bring the economy back to life. And that's a comment about the economic recovery that we are beginning to see. And Franklin Cudjoe says, yes, but for how long and at what cost? You literally forcibly pickpocketed our savings after promising not to do so, just so you could buy time from external creditors to postpone paying the humongous debts you contracted for mostly vanity projects until 2026, when you are no longer in power. No other Ghanaian leader and African leader in recent times ever invaded citizens' savings as a result of supervising wretched microeconomic governance and ecological suicide through Galamsey. Not even President Ruto of Kenya, whose country spends a third of their GDP in debt servicing, but still facing turmoil over taxes, ever did this. In fact, all right, so do you understand and appreciate Franklin Cudjoe, what he says? And he gives an advice to conclude. I've cut part of what he has to say. He says, my advice is simply this. Please invest some of the nearly 4 billion savings made solely because you wouldn't have to pay debts you scrambled for until 2026 in only growth multipliers, and the rest in a sinking fund to help your innocent successor, in case it is not Baumia, to breathe a little from what has truly been a fiscally reckless journey. The next IMF visit is imminent unless the next government reduces overall expenditure by at least 40% and embark on freeing the private sector and all individuals from the many vampire taxes and charges. Yes, Doc.
Yes.
He's speaking the reality, is it not?
I mean, there are some factual inconsistencies in that statement, and I want to set that premise right. I mean, if Franklin says that the borrowing has been as a result of this government's lackluster management of the economy, that can be termed as a factual inconsistency. For example, what was our total debt stock in 2008 before the NDC took over? Our total debt stock and I use dollar terms because the dollar is the most stable currency in the world, agreed or can be disagreed, but that is the reality. Now, in 2008, our total debt stock was about $8.07 billion. Now, between 2009 and 2016, our debt stock had actually ballooned from $8.7 billion to $29.2 billion, and that's an average year-on-year increase in terms of the nominal figure of about 261%. Now, currently, in May 2024, the BAG financial data that was published, and this is a public data that you can peruse. What is our total public debt? Our total public debt stands at, I think, about 51.7 billion USD. So, in terms of the year-on-year addition from 2017 to today, Nana Akufo-Addo's government had done barely 80% in terms of the cumulative addition of debt stock. I mean, if you are considering the marginal changes from where I am coming, so that can never be termed as a mismanagement. Yes, it's not something that yes we should be proud of, but in terms of managing the changes, the actual changes or the growth rate in debt stock, I can say here on authority based on the data that I have spoken to that Nana Akufo-Addo and Dr. Mahmoud Mamia's government have actually managed the growth rate of debt better than any other government under the Fourth Republic, especially if you are gauging the NDC as the alternative in managing debt. In fact, Samson, it is very instructive to know that between 2013 to 2016, we actually had a year-on-year growth of between 90.1% in terms of the debt accumulation, just under former President John Dramani Mahama. So obviously, this premise can never hold any water. Then he also comes to the issue of the sinking fund. I think the sinking fund is something that has been in existence even during the NDC's time. In fact, if Franklin has taken his time to read the annual public debt report, he would get to know that most of the bonds that were subscribed by this government in 2018, 2019, 2020, and 2021, part went into the annual budget funding amount. Then the remaining were used to buy back bonds that had been subscribed by previous government. For example, the NDC government subscribed a bond in 2015, which actually matured in 2021. The Eurobond that we issued was used to buy back, I think about $800 million was spent to buy back that part of that bond, and the remaining amount went to the sinking fund. So this is something that this government is already doing as established. And like I keep saying, if you read those reports, they are duly there. But however, what I want to touch on is that in terms of the forgiveness, yes, of course, I don't think it's something that is even new. In fact, the finance minister himself has reiterated this point, that he has offered two-way solutions out, that we create either a sinking fund and then we put these monies in there, or we also invest this money into instruments that will generate enough wealth going into the future if we are supposed to repay this debt that is from 2026 onwards.
All
then
right.
we can also have that room to also pay. So these are already...
Thank you, Frank. Theo, for many Ghanaians, they hear all the rhetoric, and in a few minutes we'll be going to discuss cement prices, and they would gauge it from that perspective, that in 2014 cement was selling at 31 Ghana cedis. In fact, in 2022 it was selling at around 55 Ghana cedis. Today it's over 100 Ghana cedis. So when there is this political struggle about who has done better, they clearly can tell who has done better in managing the economy, because as far as they are concerned, these prices are a reflection of the management of the economy. What do you say to Franklin Cudjoe when he suggests that the president or government or the country should not be doing anything like celebratory, that we have managed the economy, we are getting a recovery, and so on?
No, I mean, absolutely. Franklin is my boss, and he's very much spot on a number of the issues. I think it calls for sober reflection, because we've seen these celebrations before, right? Remember, we had the famous hat trick in 2019, right? And we had the big kinky party at the Ministry of Finance, only for us to end up going back to the IMF, right? Just down the line. And it reflects the fundamental issue about, value for money, the rate of borrowing, the expenditure, and then actually the amount as well. And again, back to the cement analogy that you gave, which is absolutely right. In fact, if you actually work out the cement prices in dollar terms from 2010 or so onward, it has barely changed, right? It's probably worth about $8 or so thereabouts per bag. What has changed is actually the exchange rate, and which in a way reflects, in my view, the poor management of the economy over the last couple of years, particularly in the last few years, when all the signs were there in terms of borrowing that we're actually heading for a crash down the line. So I struggle a little bit with my colleague Frank on here when we use a bit of the flow argument in terms of the debt growth rate and all of that. If you actually look at the numbers, and you're right that in 2009 when the new 2008-9 when the new administration came into power, President Mills, it was just about $9 billion Ghana cedis for what we owed, right? And then in 2016, it went up to 126 or so billion. And as we speak now, you're talking a little close to 600 billion, right? With or without the forgiveness that we've gotten. But the important point for me is
122 or 26 billion to now,
by the end of 2016.
To now, how much?
Now, the last number that I had, we were talking, let me just check my spreadsheet here because I collate these numbers.
I had 600.
The last number that I had, and you can look at the Bank of Ghana report as well, it's actually close to about 600, right, billion Ghana cedis, right? So you can work out the growth rate and all, but we can
but Doc, forgive me for interrupting. Does this jump, quantum leap, not confirm what managers of the economy have been telling us, that we went to abnormal times? Because how is that normal? You showed Prof. Mills's time, then you showed John Mohammed's time, and then suddenly about how much percentage leap. That tells you that
if you work out the numbers, right, it's a very simple math. Between 9 billion to 125, 26 billion, it's a bigger jump than from 120 to 600, if you work out the relative change. But that is not the point. And that is where I'm trying to actually get our politicians, and let us forget about this politics of comparison. I came to meet this and I added that, because the reality is that we're broke and we cannot pay our debt, and therefore we had to go to the creditors, right?
So I'll need you to hold on. We want you to conclude this discussion nicely for us with your last slide on the solutions that you are seeking to provide. So let's hold on with that for now. Let me come to Kofi Adams in the studio, and let's hear him also on this subject. You were just itching to talk because you felt that Dr. Frank Bano was not being fair to the facts and to the figures. Kobna, for example, says that theoretically, Dr. Bano is attempting to create value for the supposed debt relief. Unfortunately, from a rational and pragmatic economist perspective, this is hogwash. He is assuming the savings will be invested. Unfortunately, this reckless government will either invest in phantom projects without any tangible returns, or they will dissipate them through rampant corruption. What Kufuor did was to spend them in social infrastructure that were tangible and branded. Again, this is deferred misery. Unless the structure of the economy is not changed through deliberate interactions rather than the existing free market policy to improve the income base and at the same time curb imports, we are bound to be worse off in a decade. That's the fear of many.
Yeah.
Yes.
Samson, thank you, and good morning to your guests via Zoom, Dr. Tio Achampong and Frank Bano. But seriously, you were right. And Dr. Bano attempted to present a picture that truly doesn't exist. First was his attempt to link what happened in 2001 to what is happening in 2022. In 2001, you had a president who had just been elected, who had not engaged in any reckless borrowing and investment. In other words, he may not have even created the situation. 2022, you have a government that has been in power for 6 years, supervised, created the situation, borrowed, and invested recklessly in areas that brought no returns.
Are you not misinterpreting him?
No.
Because he only went to Kufuor's time to show us that this has been done before, but in a different way.
Well, whatever has been done, I'm only trying to say that Kufuor came in 2001 to meet a situation. He handled it in a different way. Don't equate the two to where they have caused this themselves. 2, he also attempted to look at the debt dollar denominated. Good to do that, but that is academic dishonesty. One group, Mills Mahama, borrows, invest appropriately, so they are able to manage the depreciation of your currency. In other words, another one comes, borrows, and mess it up. So your cedi depreciates so much that your debt value in terms of cedi goes so high. Then what you do is to try now converting that debt into dollar in order to bring it so down. So when you compare to what existed before, you say, oh, the borrowing after all have not been much if you compare to...
What you leave out is what Dr. Bamia calls, is it the triple whammy? Okay?
You see...
What we must acknowledge about the impact of COVID and the impact of the Russia-Ukraine war.
Samson, the Auditor General's special report on audit, as far as COVID is concerned, makes nonsense of anyone who says COVID is to blame for what happened to us. Even before COVID, we were already having challenges. Why? When COVID itself came as a disease, what were we being told? That persons with underlying conditions suffered more than those without underlying conditions. So if your economy had underlying situations, COVID, of course, will come and make your situation worse. The data shows that before COVID, Ghana was in a bad situation. Immediately we exited the IMF program. That was an opportunity for them to do what they wanted, and never invested these resources in appropriate areas. Of course, the funds that came in during the COVID period, the Auditor General's report, which the Public Accounts Committee of Parliament is even yet to interrogate, demonstrate clearly that the government did not invest right. They did not utilize the COVID funds appropriately.
You actually say COVID was a blessing.
Yes, because it gave us opportunity to raise monies that otherwise we wouldn't have been able to raise. And Samson, I did that analysis indicating that if you lose your father, assuming, I don't pray that anybody loses the father, and the funeral is conducted, and the funeral generates a lot of funds to you than the cost of treating your dad and the conduct of the funeral. You cannot, 5 months later, come to tell me you are unable to pay rent because you've lost your dad.
Especially if you got $1 million from the funeral.
Exactly, you got $1 million from the funeral. So, and if you look at the Auditor General's report on COVID monies and how it was expended, this government have no excuse to blame that. Not too long ago, you see, they say, he who the gods want to kill, they first make mad. Not too long ago, our president was in Ukraine. Doing what? Begging for help. The same Ukraine that you say is the reason for your problem. You are there begging them.
I didn't pay attention to that, but did the president go to Ukraine to beg for help?
Well, what was he there doing?
Who goes to Ukraine to beg for help at this time?
Was he there? Well, was he there to solve their problem? Was he there to solve their problem? The Russia-Ukraine that has been mentioned severally, which forced the Russian embassy in Ghana here to issue a statement and to give clear indication as to the trade arrangement between them and Ghana, and to indicate that Ghana should stop citing Russia-Ukraine activity as a reason for their problem. This usually do not happen. But Samson, it has happened under this government. You see, the whole debt deal, well, it's good that you have some kind of reprieve for servicing of interest and what have you. But like you rightly said, it's more like you are postponing the slap that you are supposed to take that inevitably you will take. But my biggest fear, Samson, is how this government utilize funds that is available to it. You remember what Mills Mahama administration did when they got some funding? They invested in targeted areas. Example, one key example I'll give you, the Atuabo gas. Before that investment, we used to spend over $300 million every year importing gas, if not more. But as a result of that investment, Ghana now saved that money and could be utilized in other areas. That is what we call positive and progressive investments that yield results. But when you have a government that takes your money and pay for Pualugu multipurpose dam, which is not done, your 11.9 million goes waste in Pualugu multipurpose dam, which is not done, and you are told that it's for feasibility studies and what have you, when no structure exists there. Samson, when you have a government that takes your money and pay $2 million into a SkyTrain project that does not exist, that had no license, that the two sector ministers of that rail development have clearly indicated they knew nothing about. When you have a government that pay contractors for no work done on the motorway, when you have a government that engage in such reckless expenditures, then you ask yourself, who do you blame? Look at bonds. At least two bonds.
But at least you acknowledge that the restructuring and what we are hearing from the IMF is good reprieve. It is setting us on a tone to recovery, however long it will take, however the suffering that may await. It is good. Is that not it?
It's good, but I was reading something about the IMF report, and I want to just read it out for you, for everybody to know what exactly I think is wrong when they base their analysis just based on figures. One of the things the IMF says is that government is investing, broadening the investment in social mitigating areas. Samson, we are all seated here and we hear complaints about non-payment of capitation grant that goes to support education at the basic level. We are here talking about LEAP that is not being paid. We are here talking about many social services that is not happening. And if IMF is basing its analysis on just paper submission, but not what is happening on the ground, then the people will be suffering and the paper will be deceiving them. Talk about inflation and check the cost of basic food items. And ask yourself, if somebody comes to tell you that inflation is dropping drastically, would you accept that person based on what you feel on the market? That if you have to buy...
Who has said that? Who has said inflation is dropping drastically?
That's what's in the report, that we're doing so well. Let me just try and then...
I don't think anybody will say inflation is dropping drastically,
Samson,
when we can see where it is going. But of course, there's some confidence that is resurging. But you don't have to be an economist to see that this will happen.
But Samson, unfortunately, that is what the IMF report has submitted to us is indicating that government is done so well in all those areas.
Let me go to...
In all those areas, and I'll get it for you.
Let me go to Frank briefly, and then to Dr. T.O. Chappon to wrap up for us. President Akufo-Addo was in the Ukraine Peace Summit in Switzerland, and he was heard clearly condemning the bullying by Moscow and the aggression that it is taking in, as it were, attacking Ukraine in the manner it is doing. And Ghana has been supportive of Ukraine over the period. And there was this talk about, looking to have some agriculture exports to Ghana. He definitely didn't go there to ask beg for money.
Samson,
quickly.
let me just read quickly, yes.
Yeah.
He said, these efforts are underpinned by reforms to bolster revenue mobilization and streamline non-priority expenditures, Okamura explained. The authorities are also expanding social protection programs to mitigate the impact of fiscal adjustment on the most vulnerable. The Bank of Ghana maintained a prudent monetary policy stance to sustain a rapid reduction in inflation and took steps to rebuild international reserves.
Okay.
This is what the IMF, these are the basis upon which is commending government. And I'm not the one saying, I'm saying that the reality we have on the ground does not match this kind of statements.
All right, thank you. Dr. Frank Bano, maybe a brief, I'm sure you will want to react to Kofi Adams, but don't go to Ukraine. I've explained that in COVID, we know that we had some 21 or almost 22 billion Ghana cedis that we got, the funds that we mobilized. We also had some almost 4 billion US dollars that we got as a result of all the funds that were mobilized during COVID, about 22 billion Ghana cedis and about 4 billion US dollars. What do you see for you also on the back of the World Bank's disbursement to us at this particular time? The disbursement of 360 million US dollars to Ghana.
Samson, thank you. So just a quick one. I mean, Mr. Adams, Honorable Kofi Adams, Honorable MP, talks about the fact that the NDC government invested the money in prudent projects, and for that matter, that is why they were able to restructure the economy. I just want to read something to Mr. Honorable Adams. This is the Ghana Economic Update Report, October 2014, and I just want to read something here for Mr. Adams listening. Now, this is very, very important. And then the net international reserve, I'm reading from this report, had declined. This is in 2014. The net international reserve had declined to $601 million in June 2014, covering only 12 days of imports of goods and services. Mr. Honorable Adams, would you call this prudent management of an economy, where you have your net international reserve declining, one of the lowest so far recorded in the history of Ghana, to $601 million, covering just 12 days of import cover in 2014? And that was one of the reasons why the NDC government had to quickly run to the IMF, if you quite recollect this. So clearly, if we are talking about prudent management of the economy, then we have a better picture than what the NDC painted for us between 2009 to 2016. I mean, between 2014 to 2015, 2016, what was our growth rate? We were doing barely 2.2, 2.8, and 3.3% as growth rate. In 2017, what was our growth rate? Our growth rate was over 8%. If you have a government that has put over 2.5 million Ghanaians, both males and females, into free senior high school, free, and you tell me that this is not prudent investment in human capital, then clearly we don't have a definition of prudent management of resources. If we are talking about infrastructure, Mr. Adams.
Okay,
now,
so Dr. Frank Bano, hold on 1 minute for me. Listen to the finance minister, Dr. Amin Adams. Listen to him and come back to my specific question to you to end your submission. The specific question is, getting the 360 million US dollars from the IMF, which the board has approved after, the review, how does it look? How does the economy look for you going forward? But let's listen to the finance minister first.
Announcement. The confidence in our economy is going to come back stronger because the world is no longer.
After meeting the requirements for the second review, following the staff level agreement, I'm glad to announce that the IMF Executive Board has today, Friday, 28th June 2024, approved Ghana's second review with overwhelming support for Ghana from the executive directors. Consistent with our resolve to stay the course on the implementation of the $3 billion 3-year IMF-supported with COVID-19 Program for Economic Growth, PCPEG, we successfully hosted an IMF mission in April 2024, which came to Ghana to undertake the second review of the implementation of the program. This is coming after an earlier approval of the first review in January 2024. This is yet an important positive development in our journey towards macroeconomic stability. And we expect to receive the third tranche of $360 million by Monday, 1st July 2024, which will bring the total disbursement 1.56 billion US dollars.
Right. Yes, Dr. Bano.
Yeah, thank you. So, I mean, clearly, like you rightly said, I think this disbursement happened yesterday. I mean, yesterday, late in the night, we got a news of the fact that the IMF board has approved, and for that matter, this disbursed the 360 million USD. And it is very, very important that we rationalize the utilization of this money, Samson. And this I'm speaking as an economist. And one of the difficulties I have had over the year in terms of looking at our budget expenditure lines has got to do with the amount of money that we spend on compensation, Samson, for example. I mean, like, if you look at the 2024 budget, that we are spending close to about 66 billion Ghana cedis on just compensation, and next year, it's most likely to go to about 75, 80 billion Ghana cedis, depending on the agitation for increment in compensation. So that is a worry, Samson. But then over the years, the question I have asked myself is, what has been the returns from compensation payment to workers in Ghana in terms of their contribution to overall GDP and productivity of the economy?
All right.
So if we move away from where we are, Samson, and talking about rationalization, then we should be targeting more capital areas that we can actually invest these monies, and we'll be able to generate enough returns going forward in the future that we can also invest in other parts of the economy, such as agriculture, the health sector, education, and so on and so forth. So these are some of the things that I think going forward ought to do, and then
Thank you very much. Dr. Tue Champong, you were getting ready to share with us your proposals to curb fiscal recklessness, which is so rampant in our system. That keeps us going to the IMF, and we are looking to go to the IMF, is it the 19th time or so? Frank Bano is hoping that this will be the last, but we have always said it's the last, and it's never ending. Yes, what do you say?
We've all said that this hopefully will be the last, but you need to take certain prescriptions in order not to go back to the doctor, right? That's the thing. Because even the last point that he made, and I'll come to the fiscal issues in a moment, right? The reserves argument that we're talking about here, and I think Frank, you quoted something about 12 days. But interestingly, you look at the 2022 data, and at one point, we also had almost 2 weeks, right? Our reserves could only cover us 14 days, right? So my concern as economist, someone from an independent perspective, is that we often then come to this politics of comparison. My record is better than yours and all of that. When in reality, when you look at it, most times it's actually been abysmal. I mean, amongst the two main parties. And I think we could do better generally as a country. And I'm hoping that, you know, as we enter the political season with a lot of the debate and the discourse, we will have avenue to interrogate some of these numbers, you know, even some more. Because again, you look at the COVID thing, and you know, there's lots of money that we got, over 21 billion Ghana cedis, right? And you ask yourself, okay, what did these monies go into? The Auditor General's report is there, you know. But
yes, Doc, is 21.8 billion Ghana cedis and 3 point something billion US dollars. That's what we got from COVID.
So, but the point is, where did this, or what, how were these monies more or less utilized? We have a big issue in this country with spending and value for money more broadly. And this cuts across political regimes, you know, because of the nature of how the political economy tends to work. And that's
please let's move on to your prescriptions. I was just mentioning the 3.8 billion US dollars because you mentioned only the 21.8 billion Ghana cedis. That's all.
Yeah. Okay. So what do we do? I think there are 4 things. Some of them we've already highlighted. The sinking fund. The interesting thing is that in the sinking fund, you read section 37(1)-4 of the Public Financial Management Act 921. It gives the minister the mandate to actually create the fund. And as far back as 2016, when we started with the second oil production and things like that. The fund was actually set up, but we never took it serious. We never actually put in the monies that are needed to actually service these debt obligations as and when they are due. So my proposal there would be further amendment to that, but in a way that you can actually force the hand of the minister and then the controller and accountant general who actually administers the fund under Section 39 of the PFM Act to make sure that we are putting monies regularly to service our debt obligations. The worst thing is to actually have someone who owes you money and still living, as though tomorrow would never come in that sense. Number two, I think that for a lot of the commitments that we see from our ministries, departments, and agencies, many of these loan agreements, if you look at the fiscal impact analysis, often it's not there. Many times there's even no business case or a strong one supporting, these interventions. If you look at the budget, the 2024 budget, paragraph 377 says that going forward, we should actually have a public investment management appraisal process, and every project going forward should have a seal of quality that is approved or given by the Minister of Finance. It'll be interesting to see to what extent this has, taken shape since the budget was announced. But any project or any loan over $1 million, for me, I think we need to have a very clear business case with an intervention logic showing how you actually would use those resources to impact the people, and it helps with monitoring and evaluation. The third point is the re-establishment of the Fiscal Council. So this was done in 2018, then we set it aside during the pandemic, and for me, the arguments that we made, that and then the fiscal rules actually was untenable. But the council, together with Parliament, and there's a new committee actually in Parliament called the Economic Committee, would allow us, if well-resourced, to effectively scrutinize fiscal policy. So, for example, they would evaluate our fiscal performance vis-a-vis the target from an independent perspective. They would also look at fiscal risk. They look at how this, affects the long-term sustainability of Ghana's public finances. And the bit that I'm particularly more keen on is that they would scrutinize and cost a lot of the tax and the welfare policies that we are bringing on board, because often that is where you get a lot of weaknesses and therefore avenues to misspend, money. And then related to that, again, it's a legal issue, is the amendment to the Act 982, the Fiscal Responsibility Act, and then the PFM Act itself to strengthen the sanctioning regime. It's a beautiful piece of law. And ordinarily, if everything were working, we shouldn't actually have been at the IMF in this first instance. But the reason why it doesn't work is that some of the sanctions that are in the relatively weak, and the enforcement of them becomes, suspect. So I think if we can work on some of these, if not all, in the short to medium term, luckily I know that part of the IMF technical assistance is actually working on some of these things, on, like, for example, the Fiscal Council. This will help us.
Thank you very much, Dr. Theo Champong. And we take a break here. We return to talk about cement prices. Dr. Baidu says that, kindly tell your guests that the most important thing to me as a Ghanaian currently is the exchange rates, price of fuel, which goes up next week, cement price, which goes up next week again, and food stuff, and not the statistics. Of course, when the price of fuel goes up, food will also go up. It says, and not the statistics. Statistics could be manipulated to paint whatever picture we want to present. We don't eat statistics in this country. We'll be right back.
In my absence, I was told that the minister wasn't going to be able to do anything. They would not listen, they wouldn't do it, they would go the way they want. Well, I have only one other avenue. I mean, encouraging them to do it is a moral persuasion. If moral persuasion fails, there is a system in the country, there's a constitution, we operate by rule of law. You come to parliament and then you ensure that there are laws. The LI is to this extent. The committee would sit down with the manufacturers and then they would determine, a roundtable discussion, determine what is it that is a reasonable price for a bag of cement. And of course, in doing that, they're going to take account of all the factors. We're not simply going to dictate to them, sell it for 20 cedis, sell it for 10 cedis. That's not how it's going to operate.
What is most outrageous about the proposed LI is if you look at the purpose of the regulation, it said that the purpose of this regulation is to provide for, one, the streamlining and regulation of the pricing of cement for wholesale and retail distribution in this country. How do you streamline that? Someone who buys cement from Gassem, for example, transport the cement to Tamale. Another person who buys the same cement from Gassem or Jata and transport the cement to Wale Wale, to Bolga, to Paga, to Navrangu, to Takwa, to Axim, their prices can never be the same. If government reduce the taxes that are imposed on the inputs they use to produce this cement, one, if government also reduce the import duties on the clinker and some of the products that they are imported into this country for the purposes of producing the cement, that they would have no reason than to reduce the prices of cement. That is what the government and the minister has control over.
For a long time, you never see cement prices de-escalating. It's always escalating. It's always going up through the ceiling, through the roof, and towards the skies. Somehow, something has to be done about this. But I think it behoves on those in responsible positions in authority to ensure that the good people of Ghana are not fleeced. I am not comfortable. I don't believe that we're getting good prices for all that it's worth. I think there's something fundamentally wrong with the pricing of cement in the country.
Right. So, K.T Hammond definitely, well, now he says we must say Alaji K.T Hammond, definitely believes in a regime of control pricing. This will not be the first time he's seeking to introduce law to control the price of, certain commodities. He's right, is he not? Cement price has been going up, never de-escalating, as he says. In May of 2012, a bag of cement averagely was 14 Ghana cedis. Now, in June 2024, you are looking at over 100 Ghana cedis for one bag of cement. He's right, is he not? Something must be done.
Samson, he's right about the prices, the cost to us. But he's wrong about his solutions. And that is the problem that we have with this MPP government. And that is the reason we say their ideas are finished in terms of solving the problems that confront this country. And we must pack them off and bring persons with fresh ideas that can deal with the situation.
You set the price by law. If you violate it, you go to jail, and it's about 3 years in jail. That's the way to make sure there's sanity in the system.
You see, it's funny. It's so funny that this government feels things they have control over, which can help manage the price, let's do nothing about. Because that is what will give us the money to be able to live like Arabian kings. And let's continue to do things that will either stifle business or that will make the people suffer.
What is it that you are talking about? What do they have control over in the pricing of cement?
We all know that cement, clinker, is a major raw material that is used in the manufacturing of cement. It is imported. Government puts duties on this clinker. And this duty is dollarized. the charges the port also take from the companies that import this clinker is dollarized. So for every day that the government fails to manage the cedi well and it depreciates, they suffer. Because you are selling the cement in cedis and you have to change and pay either dollar index cedi rate or pay dollar. Again, they have only one berthing right at the ports. The terminal, only one terminal handles clinker import. As a result of that, there's always a queue. So demurrage, which would have been avoided, they are forced to pay demurrage.
I don't understand that. That it is not the fault of the importer whose goods have been brought to the port, and yet they have to pay demurrage?
They have to pay demurrage.
It is the fault of the...
Well, you pay demurrage based on the number of days that you spend there beyond the allowable time.
I know, but it doesn't make sense to me, and it sounds to me to be unlawful because the person is not accruing demurrage because it's their fault.
Well, unfortunately, Samson, that is what is happening. That is why we are saying this is where, if the government still had people with everything functioning right, these are the areas they should be looking at. Not coming to legislate that people will go to prison for selling above a certain price that you will fix. Again, your cedi is depreciating. They are importing all these products. You have all kinds of levies on them, including fumigation levy. Meanwhile, no fumigation is done.
I've heard them say so.
Yes.
So why have they been quiet all this while that they pay for levies for things that are not done?
Are not done.
And yet they continue to pay.
And that add cost to the production. And of course, they must also make some profit. And they know tomorrow they are going to import again. And when they import again tomorrow, they will be paying another levy, by which time your cedi has further depreciated. So they must factor the future depreciations even into their today pricing.
Yes, but the minister says, which we concede he's correct, that the prices have always gone up. They never come down. Yeah. Well, in this country, since I became an adult, I don't remember any commodity that the price went up and came down. But I can tell for fuel because the price is regulated. Is that not so?
Well, not only because it is regulated, but also we pay for certain services that is rendered in the chain. For example, you and I, when we buy a liter of fuel, we pay for the transportation of fuel. So when fuel is moved from, say, Tema to, say, Bolga or Boku, the OMC don't pay for the cost of transportation. We pay. So there is a fund called the UPPF. There's a levy on every liter that is used for that payment. So it doesn't matter if you are transporting fuel to Boku or transporting to just the frontage of Joy FM here or just within Tema. There is something to equal it. Is the minister suggesting that we are going to introduce another levy on cement so that when you are moving cement to, say, Tema, or you are moving to Boku, or you are moving to Wale Wale, or you are moving to anywhere, that uniformity will then exist? That cannot happen. We already have so many levies. And so the minister is absolutely wrong. What he needs to do, and he's been so arrogant, and that is one key thing about this government. They are so arrogant, but they present themselves as listening. Engage those in the industry. They will tell you the areas you must look at.
He says the cement manufacturers who have taken a petition to Parliament insisting on consultation, he says that they can't find it in the law or in the Constitution, that he's required to consult them before he does what he's doing.
You see,
is there anything in the law that says they should consult?
Samson, the whole Constitution, it is the people of this country upon whose right the Constitution has been designed. So consultation is part of governance. Any government that says it doesn't believe in consultation does not deserve to govern the country. Then you've turned that republic into a banana republic. Consultation is key. That is where you can refine things and bring up the best.
What do you say is the solution? Because you are saying that the government has become bankrupt of ideas. What's the solution?
Well, Samson, The taxes on the material that is imported for cement production must be looked into. Increase the berthing spaces for the clearing of what? Clinker and other related materials like limestone and what have you. When you do so, demurrage will reduce.
If it's so easy to do, you don't think they would have done it?
It's so possible. If a government believes that you have housing deficit and cement is a key component of construction, if a government believes that infrastructure is key and cement is a key component, you will begin to look at things that you can reduce. So you make the price of cement a bit lower for persons to be able to afford, including if
you just said the economy is broke, which is a fact.
And I'm saying
and you are saying that in the broke economy where you need more taxes to prop it up, we should rather be reducing taxes.
What we need is the government to reduce its size, not to begin to appoint persons who have already been appointed and make them ambassadors at large, not to increase size of government. Look at what Cote d'Ivoire did. When they are faced with the problem, the old man there decided to decrease the size of what? Government. Many are doing same. What did we do here? We said to hell with us.
We didn't say that. We didn't say that. We all criticized Akufo-Addo for doing in excess of 120 or so ministers.
That the government says
and he reduced it. He reduced it to 80 something.
What is happening today? He reduced it, but now he's increasing it. Go to various boards that are not, corporations that are not performing. You can count as many as 2 deputy MDs, 3 deputy MDs, institutions that used to be...
We'll come to that subject. We'll come to that subject. In Alan Kyerematen's blueprint, he says he's seeking to cut out all of these. Let's go to Frank first, before we go to Dr. Theo Acheampong. And gentlemen, I want you to be as brief as you can. Get to the jugular for me on this matter. And then we will speak to, I'll go to Dr. Theo Acheampong and we'll go to the Professor Alex Dodu, who is Director General of the Ghana Standards Authority and Chairman of the Cement Manufacturing Development Committee established under the LI 2480. Dr. Theo Acheampong, I was using the petroleum sector analogy. You don't think that K.T Hammond, Alhaji K.T Hammond is taking inspiration from there to help all of us? Because now we just can't afford it. I was doing a project, I just stopped and you stop and hope that maybe the next few months or so things will go down and you only see that they go up. And you don't know whether if you stopped, you went or you came.
Yeah, no, he's taking inspiration for there, but on this one, he's actually wrong. Let's be very blunt on that. We've had control pricing work in this country, attempt to actually introduce it, and it did not work. And in this case, it's actually a non-starter. It's actually not going to work because what the minister is basically saying is that the people within the value chain are colluding, right? And they are monopolizing the market to their advantage. And I just told you in the last session that if you take cement prices, go back the last 15, 20 years, take the CD and work out the equivalent in dollar term. In dollar term, it's barely moved. In some years, it's even come down to about $7 or $8. So the problem of the price going up is as a result of the input and specifically your exchange rate, which is the biggest issue here, not because somebody is colluding within the market and therefore you want to attempt to sort of regulate or control, the
But he
price.
speaks about profiteering that is going on in the sector, which has to be checked.
Where is the evidence of that? I don't see any evidence from where I sit in terms of that, even if that was happening, not on the scale that then warrants some attempt to actually, correct this with a completely wrong solution from a policy point of view. Because the issue is your exchange rate. Deal with the exchange rate, deal with the CD dollar issues, and most of these things that you're talking about would come within, the normal bounds of what you expect. It's not just cement. You can take tomato, you can take pepper. So are we saying that because those other things that we're importing, take chicken, for example, because that is also gone up, then therefore we should impose control prices on chicken and other goods and services in the country. I personally don't buy that because I think the diagnosis by the minister is actually wrong, and that the root cause of the problem why cement prices are where they are is the fact that your city has been, not stable. Or to borrow the president's where he says that city na hata hata, right? That is really the issue, and that's what you've got to deal with, because you can work it out, index it in dollar, go back 20 years, go back 15 years, and you see that the price in dollar term has barely moved because you're importing most of those, right, inputs to that. So Kofi Adam was saying, you go to the port, the clinker and other things that are used to make the cement, the other input costs, even electricity, right, which is a big component in actually making cement locally. All of those prices have gone up. So necessarily it will go up. And remember that electricity, the people sell it to us in dollars. And then, you buy it in cedi. So when your cedi again is struggling, you would struggle with that. The problem, I don't think, is because somebody is colluding to game the market.
Okay.
It's a problem of, monetary.
So for the two of you, this legislation is a no-no. Professor Alex Dodu, Director General of the Ghana Standards Authority and Chairman of the Cement Manufacturing Development Committee, established under the LI 2480. Thank you very much for making time to join us here. What's your reaction to what you have heard so far, beginning with the cement manufacturers group who issued a petition and insisted, they said among other things, that it is with deep surprise that we note that this proposal was made without any proper consultation with the key stakeholders in the cement industry, particularly the cement manufacturers. Such an approach undermines the principles of fairness, transparency, and inclusive decision-making, which are vital for the effective governance and regulation of the industry. We firmly believe that the issues leading to the escalation of cement prices are complex and multifaceted, primarily driven by the rapid and consistent depreciation of the Ghanaian cedi, just as Tia Champo has said, against the US dollar. Addressing these challenges requires a comprehensive understanding and collaborative effort from all relevant parties, including the Ministry of Trade and Industry, cement manufacturers, and other stakeholders. This is Dr. George Dawson Amwa, Bishop, CEO of the Chamber of Cement Manufacturers Ghana, saying, but the minister says there's no law requiring him to do this sort of consultation with him, so sort of they can go to hell. Yes, Prof.
Samson, let me sort of situate this correctly. Cement manufacturing in Ghana hitherto has not been regulated. This has led to the siting of cement in areas where we would rather not have cement factories. And you've carried this previously, so I will not dwell too much on it. So government felt it's about time that there is a regulation specifically, one, to regulate where cement factories could be located, two, to register you before you can even sell cement, three, to regulate the manufacture, production, supply, sale, and distribution of cement. So that LI 2480, known as the Ghana Standards Authority Manufacturing Cement Regulations 2023, came into effect. The committee itself was inaugurated on the 8th of March this year. And I would also like to correct a few things. There has been consultation with the cement manufacturers. So this is what has happened. I had questions about whether Honorable K.T Hammond wants to move cement into the same way as petrol. Indeed, the Honorable Alhaji Minister has stated categorically that his experience in the industry, energy ministry, makes him believe that cement and petrol could be viewed in the same way in terms of how Ghanaians use them and how they must be somehow regulated to provide relief to Ghanaians. So at the inauguration of the Cement Manufacturing Development Committee, he made a clear call. One, could the committee, which includes AGI and the cement manufacturers represented by their chamber, can they examine the possibility of a UPPF for cement, that's the Unified Petroleum Pricing Fund, a cement equivalent? And two, what can be done about cement? The committee was inaugurated on the 8th of March. We have met 5 times. And at each meeting, we have brought the issue of cement pricing transparency. What we informed the minister is that, look, the pricing of cement is multifaceted. From our studies, definitely, there is a correlation between cement prices and the exchange rate. But that is not all. Our focus is the ex-factory price of cement fair enough so that other prices, when they add up, will not be inimical to the Ghanaian? So the question is, are we being charged too much for cement as it comes to the factory? At the committee meetings, 5 different meetings, the question to the manufacturers is, can you declare your ex-factory price? Just declare, or your indicative ex-factory price, so that if a consumer is buying, they know how much Gasem, Supersem, name the companies, are selling it at the factory gates. That provides some transparency. Indeed, all players have agreed that we know the cost buildup. Clinker is key, energy is key, exchange rate is key. But can you voluntarily declare the ex-factory prices? Samson, the minister said something which have been lost. He stated that after consistently requesting this and not getting, he has resorted to the point of legislation because industry does not want to be regulated. I believe that the whole purpose of the legislation is to promote openness and transparency in cement prices. The cement manufacturers have indicated that there are some taxes which must be reviewed. We have all agreed. In fact, we have no challenge with that because at the end of the day, it must be a national conversation. We have 3 cement companies in Ghana, or 2, starting from Gasem and so on. Now we have 14 and the number is growing. How can we promote transparency whilst putting focus on, one, the quality, which is a separate matter, as well as the prices? So really, the issue has always been on the indicative ex-factory prices. And they were told to voluntarily self-publish so that the committee can make Ghanaians aware of the average ex-factory price of the various batches of cement. Some say they have not done so as we speak. And that has been an issue of both concern and a bit of frustration, both to the ministry, myself, and all players. So really, it's about transparency in cement pricing, ensuring fair return on investment, and ensuring that the Ghanaian consumer receives a fair deal at the end of the day. And I dare say that these issues will come across for other sectors. So it's good to situate it that way. Does the Republic have a role in ensuring that pricing and profiting are within a framework? And our view is that it is the right thing to do because that is what the country needs. And it's done in all countries, including the
So as you are saying now, the cement manufacturing, companies are growing, and like we say, water will find its level. Why does the government not choose to allow competition to determine what this becomes in a free market economy? And the other question has to do with, do you find that the government is amenable to some of the suggestions they make about the taxes for the materials they import, the docking, which I find illegal really, that if I am bringing my goods to the port and you expect me to clear it within 3 days and I'm unable to do so because it is your fault, why should I pay demurrage on that? The question of clinker, we understand that there's an entity that is trying to use a local alternative so that you don't have to import. Why are we not encouraging? Where do you look at all of these factors in the mixture?
So let me take the 3 because I think I'm quite intimate with the discussions. Number 1, The minister has been frustrated because economics dictates that as demand expands, prices will fall. But it's not happening. Indeed, what is happening is that Ghana's installed capacity for production of cement is about 18 million tons, metric tons. But our demand is about 9 or 8.5. So basically, the companies are not producing as much, so that prices will remain reasonably high. So demand and supply are not happening because they can produce so much, but they are not. And of course, it's a business practice that one cannot fault them. Businesses have to make a decent profit. So our point is that let's work on the factory gate, and I will not belabor that point. But in the cement industry, the fact is that the laws of demand and supply do not appear to work. Is it because they meet to decide that I think I do not have the capacity to interrogate that, and I will skip that for another day? Now, the issues of the taxes, we have engaged the industry. They made a point which every Ghanaian will be concerned about. The Standards Authority have done research, and we have noticed that some particular players believe the only way to compete is to reduce the quality of cement. We did close down 3 of them, and I can assure you, in the coming days, a lot more will be closed down. Because there's one thing we will not compromise on: quality. Finished. Now, on the issue of prices, they mentioned the various taxes which can be looked at. And when we went to Parliament, that was on Thursday with the Honorable K.T Hammond, Honorable Anyenini, there was no disagreement on the fact that there must be transparency in the pricing of cement. The issue which came up, and we did find various degrees of acceptance between different players, is the mention of the word price control. I would say that the legislators, as we do in legislation, are still jaw-jawing to find out what is the best fit, which will not reduce the image of Ghana as a country that promotes free markets, but what fit would also show all players that as a country, there are regulations for all players. I mean, we remember recently Microsoft being fined for using their dominant market position to drive out competition. We know about the MTN being asked to charge realistic rates, and so on and so forth. So our point is that there must be transparency. The issues of the taxes, indeed, the industry players were right. They said if these taxes were for regulatory purposes, so that all players are playing on an even playing field, we'll love it. And as a Standards Authority, what we want, definitely, is more funds to ensure that every bag of cement you buy is of the quality you expect. Then the market will play. That has to happen. But in tandem with that, we believe that transparency in the cost build-up will also benefit consumers, and we will then have an open and transparent discussion between all of us.
Right. In 30 seconds, what will be your proposal to ensure that this happens in a manner that satisfies all the players?
The manufacturer should accept that government's request for transparency in the pricing of the ex-factory price of cement is key. They must also work with government to see which taxes could be moved into regulatory affairs, because when that happens, let me say the players not playing according to the rule will go out, and the genuine, decent players can produce good quality products, hopefully at affordable or more affordable prices that Ghanaians can buy. That way you realize that we would have moved from where we were to where we all want to go collectively as a nation.
Thank you very much. Professor Alex Dodu is the Director General of the Ghana Standards Authority and also Chairperson of the Cement Manufacturing Development Committee established under law. We take a break. We return to check if Alan Kyerematen can do the things he is promising in his manifesto. That is the Movement for Change. They have a manifesto. They don't call it a manifesto, but it's mouth-watering. It's a 81-page book containing bold, transformative policies for a sound economy. The Constitution calls for a sound economy, for a sound economy and for good governance. And you find that for most of the things that have engaged our attention over a period as a nation, they appear to pick what comes out to be best policy. They pick all from all these sectors. When it comes to governance, they seem to have listened to the debate on constitution amendments, the things that need to be done away with. When it comes to corruption fight, they seem to have listened to what is critical to fight corruption, and they have put them in the book. We'll be right back. You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's our most authoritative news analysis platform, and here on Newsfile, we put Ghana first. And let's get to see whether the proposals that the Movement for Change, Alan Kyerematen's movement, are making realistic proposals that we can actually look at and sort of force the parties to look in that direction in the campaign. Nana Heninto is senior advisor to Alan Kyerematen, and then Haruna Mohammed, Deputy General Secretary of the New Patriotic Party, Sia Kofi Adams, is still here with us. Nana Heninto, thank you very much. And I've been reading this 81-page book, and that's my view of it. I think the ideas in there, the policies that you seem to enunciate in there resonate with Ghanaians. Somebody will say, first you must win power to be able to implement them. Let's look at just the governance aspects, what you seek to do. What informs this document? And we hardly have independent presidential candidates bring up documents like this.
Hello, Samson.
Yes.
What's your question again?
This may be the first time we are seeing independent presidential candidates do such a thorough job with such far-reaching proposals, most of which resonate with the people. The governance aspect, what informs the ideas and policies that you seek to implement from there?
Right, Samson, thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to discuss the great transformational plan which Honorable Alan John Kyerematen, independent candidate for the December 7, 2024 presidential election, has come up with. Earlier on, I was following your discussion when you mentioned it and you kept calling it a manifesto. I think I would have to insist that this is not a manifesto. This is a plan, because typically what manifestos do is just to give you a set of promises and give you just little hints of how, in fact, the how doesn't really come up in many cases. They tend to be a set of promises. But when you take this document, which Honorable Alan Kyerematen has prepared, it gives you both the issue and the solution. So that is why we call this a plan. It is policy prescription, policy solution. So that is how I want us to look at this whole discussion. And with your permission, before I answer your question directly, I'm sure this matter will come up. I heard you discussing with the panel in the studio the issues of cement pricing and a committee to look at the development of cement and so on and so forth. I think when you get into the Alan Kyerematen plan, then you would understand that there is a way out, and that is not what the current government is pursuing. But having said that, to your question on governance, the whole transformation plan is about transforming the way our country, our government runs our country, both in terms of governance and in terms of the economy, in terms of social sector, and indeed the issue of the mentality of we ourselves as Ghanaians, as a society, the negativity that ought to be changed. And that is why Alan is calling this a plan for transformation. Now, when you look at the governance structure cluster, there are a couple of pillars. As Alan puts it, there are a couple of pillars under the governance structure. First of all, you have the prescription to deal with corruption, the prescription to deal with public sector reform, the judiciary, executive, the Council of State, local government and decentralization, chieftaincy, national security and defense optimization, media, public information management and consultation, diplomatic and international relations, civil society organizations, economic governance, social governance, and constitutional reforms. Yeah, fortunately, I've just arrived at your premises, and I think I should be able to join you in the studio in a few seconds. So
right. So you just get in here, and so look, Haruna, they begin with corruption, and they accurately appreciate, and this is the governance cluster we are looking at. They accurately appreciate, as we are aware of, that 3 billion is not accounted for each year in this country. And anti-corruption organizations will say what that means is it is lost to corruption. We have heard even higher figures about that. They say they intend to amend the constitution and appoint an anti-corruption czar with independent prosecutorial power, separate from that of the Attorney General. Do you see a clear difference from Office of the Special Prosecutor? They are introducing an anti-corruption citizens charter requiring every person, as provided under Article 41F of the Constitution, to protect and preserve public property and expose and combat misuse and waste of corruption. Do you see this to be any much different from the non-implementation of the Whistleblowers Act? For example, there's a reward also there. They say they want to establish an anti-corruption reward scheme. The Whistleblowers has a reward scheme since it was passed 2006. That scheme is not there. They want to bring in some support, direct and indirect, for civil society, as in funds, to help them fight corruption.
Thank you very much, Samson. First and foremost, I would like to say good morning to your cherished viewers out there. Today is my first time of sitting in studio.
Live, yeah.
I've always joined via Zoom.
We are happy to have you here.
And also say good morning to my senior here, Honorable Kofi Adam, and yourself. I think that once we are moving into the mainstream of politics for the election 2024, all political parties, including independent persons who wants to become president or become members of parliament, will try as much as possible to proffer some sort of solutions which has not yet been executed. Mm-hmm. You know, it is very easy to put plans on paper. But however you ask yourself, these persons that are putting these plans on paper, for example, Alan Kyerematen has not been denied the opportunity to be in government, both in President Kufuor's administration and also President Akufo-Addo's administration. He has been given a very big department in terms of how governance systems are run. And there is no problem for him to aspire to become president or to have a vision to become president and also to put plans down to be able to govern this country. If you look at the areas that he has analyzed in terms of corruption, I don't think that there is anything new in terms of what he's putting together. This is just English that has been put together to be able to help the Ghanaian people to be able to garnish it just as it is, because if it is a reward scheme, even in the police service, when a crime is committed, it is put out publicly that whoever is able to assist in terms of investigation and what have you is given a reward scheme. So it is not something that is new, but we welcome all these particular decisions or all these suggestions that people are bringing on board. But if you look at us as a party, because we are not in to discuss any presidential candidate, we are in to discuss our presidential candidate who stands tall among all of them. If you look at the elections of His Excellency the Vice President as the flag bearer of our party, he took the opportunity to tell the people of Ghana within a short period the vision that he has for the people of Ghana. And the fight against corruption is clearly indicated in this particular vision of His Excellency the Vice President and the flag bearer of the New Patriotic Party. So looking at what they present, I don't think that it is something that we would have to debate them, because this is something they are putting on paper. But you look at His Excellency the Vice President, what has he offered in terms of governance system in fighting corruption as Vice President?
For today, it is what the Alan Kyerematen's team, that is the Movement for Change and the Alliance for Revolutionary Change, what they are proposing, that is bringing us to the discussion table today. I'm sure at another time we'll discuss Dr. Bawumia and what he also wants to do. Kofi, how do you see what they seek to do as far as the governance cluster is concerned?
Well, Samson, it's difficult to discuss what they seek to do.
40 ministers.
Without
40 ministers, they are going to cap the number of Supreme Court judges. This has been an ongoing debate for a long time. They are going to scrap the Council of State, whose advice is not binding on anybody.
Yeah. And like I said, it's difficult to discuss only what they seek to do without discussing what led to the existence of the movement. Samson, like Haruna said,
the two of you want to change the focus of the discussion today.
They were in there. They took part. Key persons. Alan Kyerematen, ambassador, minister under President Kufuor, great president, minister under Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo. You're talking about Nano Hininto, general secretary, no small post, Boniface Abubakar Sadiq, MP, minister, and who, for the first time, to have a minister of state at the office of the vice president. We normally have minister of state, office of the president. We don't have minister of state, office of the vice president. It was the first time that we had a minister of state being appointed to the office of the vice president. That is Boniface Abubakar Sadiq. So for today, for Boniface to choose to leave all the benefits that he has as a member of the NPP and someone who would have worked so closely with Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia to support Alan Kyerematen knows how rotten and how low we've gotten to, and that he cannot put whatever little he has on Bawumia. That explains why he left. Of course, Bawumia Samoa, former MP, director of communication, no mean a person. Obsenadoye, parliamentary candidate. So it is important, Samson, to discuss the genesis, why they have left.
Dr. Abu Sakara Foster.
For example, to say that what they think is the right thing to be done cannot be done in the MPP that exists today. And not with Bawumia and not with Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo.
Could you not rather say that this is an indication of the fact that they are moving away to be able to effect the change they want?
Because that change, you think that if these things they are talking about could be done by MPP, they will leave. Who want to leave? Look, many of us have gone
You are still speaking, that's a feather in their cap.
I'm saying that
the MPP is not doing them, and that's why
the MPP is not doing well. That's why they are leaving. That's why they are leaving. The MPP has failed. And the MPP cannot deal with the situations that confront us. That is why they are leaving. And they have stated clearly what it is that they think that must be done. But now to the question, whether there is the capacity to be able to do what it is that they have stated they want to do.
Where there's a will, there's a way.
That's why I'm saying that they have stated what it is that must be done. They have come to a conclusion that the MPP cannot do it. And I agree with them clearly that they cannot do it. Because
that's their social contract with the electorate.
With the electorate, they have failed and so on and so forth. So they cannot do it. But now, can the movement do what they say they can do? No.
Hey.
And I think that John Dramani Mahama will do a better job implementing, because many of the things they stated in there.
So let him highlight some of them for you.
Okay.
Let him highlight some of them for you. We are not into local governance. Decentralization is important to Ghanaians. The president was literally pushed to an idea that he had also supported many years in opposition, only to come into government wanting to do it by a certain political, means, and also seeking the amendment of an entrenched provision of the Constitution. When there's a provision that can easily be amended just by Parliament, you say that's what you are going, the low-hanging fruits, to make sure that there is a decentralization, district assembly, chief executives will be elected, and you don't need to go to a referendum to do that. I say when I read your document, I'm seeing that the things that are popular with Ghanaians that previous governments have failed to do are the things that you have picked and polished and put in there.
Samson, thank you very much. Before I go to your substantive issues, let me quickly address the issue that my nephew here brought up. What's the name again? Aruna. Yes, and then of course...
I will propose that because of time constraints,
yeah,
let's focus on this.
Yeah, I know, but it's important. This is a very important platform.
Okay.
So when you get information out here, it goes quite far. Now, to say that what Alan has presented is just English, it really surprises me. I'm sure he hasn't had time to read this document. As I told you earlier on, as I came, I listened to you guys discussing the cement pricing issue and the mechanism that the government, the current government, seeks to use to try and bring down prices of cement. If you want to bring down prices of cement, few things Kyerematen will tell you to do. Make sure your exchange rate is low. Your currency is stable. Your export earnings are growing. So you have enough foreign exchange to back whatever raw materials you may need to import from out there. Make sure you have removed nuisance taxes. Make sure your taxation regime and duties and so on are not inimical, they are not negative, they are not counterproductive to production. Now, when you do this, obviously you need regulation in the economy, you need regulation in any sector. But when you do this, you wouldn't need to use price control mechanisms, which is basically, if you look at critically what the government is trying to do now, it's basically price control in a liberalized market economy. That is just not going to work. So that is why Alan says you need to transform, and this is not just piecemeal change. That is why you read this document, and I'm happy you yourself conceded that it looks to you that this is a synthesis of possibly the best ideas that may have been floating around. Nobody is saying anybody is trying to create anything from thin air. No. These are issues and ideas that we know about. How come we have not implemented them? And I will tell you why. Kofi Adams is saying that it is not possible. These are good ideas. It cannot be implemented. You said we cannot do it.
Yes, you have proven not to have the capacity to do it.
So let me respond.
So I didn't say there's a difference.
Please, hold on.
No, there's a way difference.
I heard you, but I didn't interrupt you. Hold on. Can you imagine that a mother brings forth a child, and for whatever reason, another woman sitting somewhere says that I am a better person to mother your child, to breastfeed your child, to bring up your child than yourself? I mean, in a sense, it even sounds almost like an insult. The point is that Alan has told you, I am presenting something radical to Ghanaians. First, it has never been the case, and all of you are here, you can bear me out, that a person aspiring to be an independent president of Ghana has taken off the way Alan has taken off, and has come as far as Alan has come. So far, there's been no example. There have been independent attempts at it. 2, even the political parties, well-established political parties, MPP, NDC, haven't even come up with their manifestos yet, 5 months to election. And the gentleman here is telling me he wants to discuss what Dr. Bawumia has. He hasn't put anything on the table yet, anyway. He hasn't put anything on the table. He has said digitization. That's about it.
He's been announcing a number of policies.
Yeah, okay. But I'm telling you, is the MPP's manifesto out? Has it been?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Of course, they will pick the old one, they will rehash it.
Okay.
The NDC
So
will do
you
the
see,
same.
when you, as a party, established for how many decades now, haven't been able to do what one individual with a very small team within weeks, if you like months, is able to produce such a comprehensive blueprint, providing you with solutions, not just the discussion of problems, but solutions, then you should know that this person with that team already shows you the capacity that Kofi Adams is talking about.
So I mentioned local governments. What you want to do.
Establish the perspective.
What you want to do with local governments, where election of MMDCs,
yes,
where the president took a different view,
yes,
despite surveys by CDD and co that suggest that over 70%, almost 80% of Ghanaians want the election of their MMDCs on non-partisan basis. You have gone for just that.
This is just the very essence of Alan Kyerematen's independent candidacy. Non-partisan. If Alan is suggesting a non-partisan president, chief executive for the whole country, is it a big thing to suggest a non-partisan district chief executive? It just flows naturally. Do you understand? Now, what Alan is saying, which I believe we need to pay attention, is that we have come a very long way. 67 years of independence. We have practiced democracy. We have attempted one-party state. We have gone through several military regimes and so on. And now we are back to the Fourth Republic. In the Fourth Republic alone, we have had 32 years of party management. 16 years MPP, 16 years NDC. By the time the last NDC administration was leaving office, we had been taken to Doomsor and IMF. As we speak now, at the exit of the 16 years of NDC, MPP, we are left with Doomsor and IMF. Even though they call it a different name, Ghanaians know what it is. Now, I'm asking you, and I'm asking myself, and I'm asking all Ghanaians. So if 16 years, a party cannot show Ghanaians that we can get out of this mess and show us clearly how, and someone comes and says that, look, this is how, give me the mandate. And Alan is not just asking for the mandate. He has a track record, even as a private person, as only an ambassador, as only as a minister, not yet vice president, let alone president. Alan has shown what he can do. So to respond to your question directly now, the very essence of Alan's independent candidacy is justification enough for his support for independent, non-partisan district administrator. Now, what you find is that partisanship and the very negative aspect of partisanship is one of the biggest reasons why Ghana is where we are.
So I'm looking at I'm looking at the list of things you are seeking to do in the governance area.
Yes. No. So have I answered your question on
you have
district?
Yes, you have.
Non-partisan.
You have.
Have
now
I?
The major question.
Yes.
I think we may have to look for time and just sit down with you.
Yes.
You.
Yes.
As in the movement for change and revolutionary change
you have to
alone.
Yes.
To dissect.
Go through this.
Your
yes.
thing. There are things that we can also say that you are seeking to, as it were, do for the sake of, I don't know how to describe it. You say you want an anti-corruption czar with independent prosecutorial authority. Special prosecutor has that.
Can I respond to you?
Say you want an award scheme for people who who blow the whistle on corruption. We already have the Whistleblowers Act, except that it's not being implemented, and the scheme for reward is not being implemented.
Okay, let me go to the independent.
I'm coming. Just
let me go to the independent. Right now, the agencies that are mandated by law to deal with corruption, IOCO is one of them.
That's right.
OSP is the newest.
That's true.
The BNI, NIB, whatever, charge, even the police.
The police and Attorney General, they are the biggest.
They are all part of it. Now, what has happened? We sit here as Ghanaians and complain that we've set up institutions and either that we don't resource them properly or we find a way of undermining those same institutions, and so therefore the institutions become ineffective and redundant. So really, is it just good enough to have a litany of institutions littered all over the place and none of them is effective enough? Rather than consolidate both the law that establishes them, the mandate and the authority and the power that is given to these institutions, especially in terms of its independence.
So consolidation is central.
Consolidation is first, the legal consolidation, and then the institutions.
Because of time, the final question I'll ask you before I come to them is this.
But I haven't
you must win power. We have time. We don't have time.
Yes.
You must win power before you can do these lofty things.
That is right.
Have 60 ministers, scrap a council of state. 40 ministers. Sorry, 60 ministers is the NDC.
40.
And then Baumia is 50 ministers. Yes. Okay. Before you can do all of these things, you must win power.
Yes.
Including your own.
Yes, we must win power. And we are working at that. As we speak now.
You must have a parliament where you have majority.
Yes. You don't seem to understand. We don't have a parliament which we or the president has majority. I think I have to drum this lesson or this idea back again. An independent president seeks to establish a government of national unity, non-partisan national unity. This is not a novelty that is not known to the world. In fact, in West Africa, it is happening. Next door, in Benin, it is happening. So it is not as if it is absurd to conceive of an independent president who cannot operate because he doesn't have members of parliament. 2, Alan's key proposal is that if we don't reduce the effect of bitter, divisive, destructive partisanship, Ghana's development forever and ever is going to be doomed. So this is a major, bold attempt at making sure that you have a president who can call on the best talents and resources from within parliament and outside of parliament. Right. And I'm just waiting, and I shudder really to think that Alan Kyerematen is independent president of Ghana. And he finds a very talented...
Unfortunately, we have run out of time, so let me come to them. Let me come to them for very brief comments.
Simply because
Atapoku Collins says that the duopoly has done their part, but unfortunately the failures outweigh the success. They have become too comfortable in moving the country to negative dimensions. It's time to change hands. GTP is the way to go. That's support for an independent presidential candidate. You guys must be scared. Yes, you.
Samson. Thank you very much. First and foremost, I would want to correct this particular impression. Dr. Baumia is the only presidential candidate after his election on the 7th of February went and delivered his vision to the good people of Ghana. So to say that,
so I take it that
he has not put his manifesto. He has not put. It's not a manifesto. You don't call your own a manifesto because I heard on this show. Yes, you don't call your own a manifesto. So you have no interruptions. You have not produced. You have not produced any manifesto to the good people of Ghana. You are not in position to even call this document a manifesto. We have presented a vision, and it is the first. He is the first presidential candidate to present his vision to the good people of Ghana. Secondly, you are talking about Alan having track record. We all know, under President Kufuor, he was given what we call the presidential special initiatives. What has been the record of that particular?
Can I respond to that?
I
Because
thought you guys have been excited about that. Anytime you raise that question.
I'm making my submissions.
I will let you talk.
Because you need to check the boxes to get to understand. Somebody has been given the platform.
I'm sorry, you have just a minute.
So you check yourself. You ask yourself under the Presidential Special Initiatives, what was his track record? You check yourself when he was given the platform for the one district, one factory, what was his track record? You check yourself when he was given the ambassadorial or this job, what was his track record? You check yourself. If you check that vis-a-vis that of Vice President Bawumia, you would clearly see that Bawumia stands tall in terms of the governance system in this country. He's talking about fighting corruption. The biggest of fighting corruption is transparency. Transparency is the very key thing. And if you read clearly the vision of Dr. Bawumia, he said that he's going to increase transparency in terms of fighting corruption. He's going to bring Ghana closer to the cashless economy because he has been a digital person who has digitized the entire economy of this country. He says that he's going to encourage the population to use electronic channels of payment and also make sure that he publishes online details of all public contracts. And this is going to help in fighting corruption. And if you look at the current trajectory, what we have done as government, looking at the special prosecutor, it is not all different from what they are talking about.
Okay.
It is just that some aspects needs to be implemented.
Kofi.
So there is nothing new that they are bringing on.
Let's hear Kofi.
Clearly, as I've said earlier, the Alan and his team decision to leave this corrupt,
indictment of the MPP.
It's an indictment of MPP and Dr. Bawumia. They have clearly come to a conclusion that he's a total failure. He cannot achieve. He cannot do anything. And Boniface Abubakar Sadiq is that critical example of someone who was so close to him, who have known him and thought that he's a failure. But the proposition from them, like you said, are issues that are already out there. When you cite, for example, the local government...
We are looking for who will do them. That's what they are
well, but let me tell you, that's what I'm saying. When you cite the local government issue as an example...
What prevented the NDC as government from doing them?
When the MPP currently wanted to turn it partisan and political, we were the only people who spoke and opposed to it and suggested what they have written in this document.
Facts.
So I am telling you.
Facts. So I led the campaign against it. And fact is, let me tell you this, fact is, the NDC supported what the government had proposed. And it was later public opinion went against you, and then you changed.
No, Samson,
there's nothing wrong with changing your stance.
No, Samson. We were for and against the election at the very local level, turning it partisan. And that was why we argued that chiefs and all other persons who are barred from taking part in active politics are part of the local government system. Yeah, but Samson, the Alan team didn't speak, but we spoke at that time. Yes. That is what I'm telling you. The only person, let me make my last point. The only person in all this flow that has the experience in, out, and going in is John Dramani.
Thank you very much.
The one that
let me give you this assurance. Let me give you this assurance. We will arrange and interrogate this your plan a lot more. Thank you very much. He spoke to the PSI, but he didn't speak to what was wrong. What wrong Alan did. This has been Newsfile.
He gave them.
I said about successes.
He never performed.
I thought about successes.
And my outfit, as always, is by Kunati Clothing. They are at Adenta Shopping Center, Adenta Down. You can call them 0244 67.